you shall have trials and tribulations. Truth be told, many of us have bought into what the TV preacher told us, that if you just get this prayer cloth for $19.95, if you get this water and sprinkle it on your stuff, you shall never taste trouble again. You've purchased and bought this idea that the life of the believer is supposed to be that full of joy and peace, and it should be. But the Bible also tells us that man born of a woman, those are just a few days, and those days are filled with trouble. But the good news I know about my God is that trouble don't last always. That's what the old saints would say. They say, trouble, it sounds good, but what about when you're in the trouble? What do you do when you're in not just something bad happens or it's a bad day, but what if it's a bad season? Everything that can go wrong is going wrong. Seem like you can't get ahead. It seems like you can't get over one thing and something else happening. If it ain't one thing, it's another. You fix the kids and the marriage starts falling apart. You fix your marriage and so dies. You funeralize them and money trouble shows up. You take care of your money problems and job situations come up. It seems like it's always one thing after another. It's one thing to have a bad day. It's a whole nother thing to have a bad season. And it could cause you to, with your saved, sanctified self, to look up and say, God, do you even care? How you say you love me and you sit here and watch all of this suffering. And it ain't like, Lord, because some of us can testify and say, Lord, I ain't been perfect, but my neighbor down the street, they don't even go to church. They drug dealers. They don't even live right. And they seem like they don't have any problems. But for those of us who are serving you and giving to you and sowing into the ministry, it's always us. Your car gets repoed and your neighbor don't ever serve God. And all of a sudden they get new ones. Have you ever wondered, Lord, do you even care? I thought for a long time that peace was the absence of chaos. Until I marched into my very first seminary class in 2005. I sat down in front of my professor, and it was a classroom full of us, and he comes into the room, and back then they still had chalkboards, and he put this picture up on the board, and the picture was a dove in the middle of a storm asleep. And he asked us, he said, I need y'all to guess the title of this painting. And all of us had clever ideas. Some called it Storm Rider, and some of us called it this and that. And he said, all of you are wrong. The name of the painting is Peace. I said, wait a minute, whoa, back up. We see thunder, we see lightning, we see wind, we see everything in chaos up in the backdrop. He said, yeah, but the dove is still sleeping. I said, how is that peace when all this is going on around him? And he said, because the artist wants you to know that peace is not the absence of trouble. It's the presence of God. Peace is not a condition, it's a person. Peace is not a climate, but it's a person. What person? Jehovah Shalom. Because what we did not see is the dove resting on a big set of hands. And I need you to understand that if a dove can find sleep in a storm, how is it that I can find rest in a season like this? If you ain't careful, you'll go through enough trauma, it'll keep you up at night. Worried about what's going to happen to your family, worried about what's going to happen to your job, worried about what's going to happen here, what's going to happen there, worried about this, worried about that. It'll cause you to be up at night and tired during the day. That type of stress will take you out. But I want you to understand, and I mean hear me well, God does care. Pastor, that sounds real cute. It sounds real churchy. It sounds real good, but it don't feel like he cares. Because how he sit here and watch all of this and do absolutely nothing. I want you to understand that I used to, when people would ask me, where was God when this happened? Where was God when that happened? I hate to tell you, but this is going to make matters worse, but he was right there the whole time. When they lied on you, when they betrayed you, when they mistreated you, when they died on you, when they cheated on you, when they went through all of that, when you went through all of that, he was sitting right there. And some people think that's good news, but if you my homeboy, if you my homegirl, and you sitting right here watching everybody mistreat me, and you got the power to shut all that down, I got a problem. Let's just be honest, because, we got to be honest. Sometimes you've been mad with God. Because you sat here and watched this foolishness. You watched how they talked bad to me. You watched how they mistreated me. I prayed and they still died. I believed you and they still died. And look at you sitting right here with all this power in your hands. And you just said nothing? Do you even care? Have you ever, you ain't got to say it out loud, but have you ever wondered, Lord, are you even hearing me? See, this is real talk because see, at church we want everybody to think that us and God are always on good terms. But I wish I had a few folks that, to be honest, I've been mad with the Lord before, upset, didn't understand. This don't make sense to me. Your word said this, your scripture said this, but this is what keeps happening. You keep telling me that weeping may endure for a night, but joy will come in the morning, but I ain't seen joy yet. You keep telling me that all things work together for the good, but ain't nothing working out. You ever felt like God was just guilty of false advertisement? You ever felt like God just don't even seem to be paying attention to you? And it's enough, if you wonder it enough, just like if you had somebody in your life that didn't do what you thought they should, you'd walk away from them. Truth be told, you'd be surprised how many believers have thought for a split second, maybe me and God don't need to be a thing. See, we got to be honest. We got to be honest. There have been times where you've doubted God so much that you felt, let me just, no, God ain't for me. God ain't for me. It's not our belief that's the problem, but it's sometimes our unbelief. Them days that cause you to mentally want to check out and never come back to church again, never believe the preacher again, never follow God again. You have days like that where it gets so bad. You ever hit rock bottom and realize that I'm sick of this? But I want you to understand, hear me well. If you hit rock bottom, you just might discover that he was the rock holding you up at the bottom. So in this text today, the disciples have the same question. Lord, do you even care? Lord, do you even care? In our text for today, Mark pens this gospel account. It's a gospel account that's the briefest of gospel accounts. Although he's not the most wordy of the four gospels, he's the one that's brief, but he gets straight to the point. And so in chapter 4, Jesus has performed miracle after miracle. He's taught all day, he's preached all day, and it's time he tells his disciples, man, let's go to the other side. And after all of this preaching, after all of this ministry, after all of this churching, the boat. that tells us how human he was. And so they get, he in verse 35, I'm just going to walk through this passage. In verse 35, it says, and the same day when the evening was come, meaning he had a full day of church, a full day of ministry, and the disciples were with him. And the text says, he says to them, let us pass to the other side. Stop right there. Stop right there. Pull up verse 35. I want you to see this because I don't want you to think I made it up. Pull up verse 35. I want you to lead it on the screen for me. We're going to walk right through these verses. He says, let us pass over unto the other side. If we're not careful, we'll bypass this verse like it's an instruction. But it's not an instruction. It's a promise. What do you mean, Pastor? He said, let us pass over to the other side. Before they faced the storm, before they faced the problem, before they faced the trauma, he said, let's pass to the other side. If God said we going to the other side, I don't care what you got to face on your way, you are still going to the other side. If God said he's going to heal, I don't care what you might have to be sick for him to do it. You might have to be broke for him to do it. But if God said it, that's exactly what's going to happen. How do I know? We keep reading. Let's go to verse 36. The text says in verse 36, it says, and when they had sent away the multitude, everybody they were preaching to, because Jesus had been doing a lot of ministry all day. And so he sent the audience away. He had evidently developed a huge following. One thing I love about Jesus' ministry is he built a mega church. No building, no praise team, no sound system, no youth ministry. All he had was the word. And they followed him. And so it was so that he had to send them away. And the text says they took him as he was into the ship. They took Jesus. The disciples, why is this important? The disciples became armor bearers. They took care of their pastor. They took care of their leader. Because watch this, what happens to the pews also happens to the pulpit. So the disciples took him into the ship. They made sure he was set up and settled. And there were also other little ships. So they put him on the big one. And there were little ships that followed them. And so in verse 37 says, and the text says, there arose a great storm of wind, waves, and they beat into the ship until the ship was full. When this storm, they were told they're going to go to the other side. And on their way, they encounter a storm. And this ain't just no regular storm. This was a brutal, violent storm. So bad that the wind and the waves rocked them. They had come too far to go back to land. And they were too close to the other side to quit. But they were just in the middle of the sea. What do you do in the middle, Miles? In the meantime, because the meantime can be a mean time. They were sitting in the middle of this ship being beat up by this storm. And the text says it got so bad that the water got into the ship. Can I teach right there for a moment? A lot of what's happening to you is now starting to happen in you. I used to think this text was just about the disciples, but it's also about the ship because you can see yourself in the ship. The text says that the very storm that was concerning them, that was beating up on the ship, it happened now in the ship. The water got on the inside of the ship. On the inside of the ship. The water got on the inside. I need to help somebody understand this. Stop allowing what's happening outside of you to start happening in you. I know they're angry, and I know there's turmoil going outside, but if you're not careful, it's going to start to change the way you live, change the way you think. It's going to change your temperament. It's going to change your attitude. It's going to change your concepts, your ideas. It's going to start affecting the way you operate with people. You cannot allow what's outside to get inside. I'm talking to somebody right now. Your house is in trouble because of what's going on in somebody else's house. Oh, preach, Pastor Jay. How you going through all this mess because of what's going on in somebody else's house? Stop letting what go on in other people's problems come into your. Sometimes we got to learn to just, baby, look, that ain't my business. That ain't got nothing to do with me. That's your problem, and all I can do is pray. Who am I talking to? You can't fix everybody's stuff. Some stuff you got to just learn. That ain't mine to deal with. Ooh, I want to go deeper with this so bad. Yeah, I am. Sometimes it's even your own family that you got to tell, that's your problem. That's your business. Them your bills. I don't know who this is for, but you can't run to everybody's rescue. Just because they called don't mean you got to fix it. You better learn to tell folks, no. Ooh, I want to go deeper again. Even if it's your child, tell them no. Ooh, y'all need to learn the value of the word no. Because watch this, what's happening with them, now all of a sudden you dealing with sickness you ain't never dealt with before, and they running all these tests. Do you know why they can't find nothing? Because it's stress that don't even belong to you. Ooh, but the best thing I ever learned was to start telling folks, nope, no. Yeah, I got it, and no, you can't borrow it. Yeah, I got it, no, you can't have it. Yep, I'm finna go on a cruise. Yep, I'm finna go on vacation with the money you asked to borrow. Baby, you should have figured your rent out long before now. That ain't got nothing to do with me. Baby, I'll pray for you and go on about your business. It is not your job to save everybody. And scholars suggested that when the water got into the ship, that they would be trying to take the water deep and throw it out of the ship. They'd be trying to scoop the water out of the ship. And I'm like, you in the middle of the ocean. What makes you think you got enough buckets to compete with that? So instead of them, thank you, Holy Spirit, instead of them dealing with the source of the problem, they were only dealing with what they could see. But their problem was something they couldn't see. How did the water get into the ship? The wind put it in there. With the water, which is what they can see, but it's being caused by something they can't see. Hear me, listen what I just said, listen what I just said. They're dealing with the water, which is what they can see. But the problem is something that they can't see. You keep dealing with the part that you can see. But what you don't know is the conversations that's been had before you saw what you saw. You dealing with what they said in your face, but you ain't dealing with the problem who they've been talking to before. You dealing with the rent problem today, but the real problem is what you can't see, that they have a budgeting issue. They have a money management problem. You got to deal with what you can't see. The water was the tangible problem, but the wind was the spiritual problem. Their physical problem was caused by a spiritual malfunction. Listen what I'm saying, listen what I'm saying. If the water represents the tangible and the wind represents the spiritual, then you might be dealing with physical problems because of a spiritual malfunction. What you're dealing with in the flesh could be because somebody ain't been delivered in the spirit. And you keep trying to fix the physical when the root of the problem is spiritual. They dealing with depression. That's why they don't manage their money well. They're dealing with a spirit of adultery. So that's why they can't. What the problems you seeing is that they fighting all the time. But now there's another problem where they have insecurities. There's a spirit of insecurity. I'm just showing you some tangible problems that show up as a result of spiritual problems. Am I making sense? Sometimes when you're dealing with people who are insecure, that's a spiritual problem. But it can show up in manipulation. It can show up in control. It can show up in a variety of ways, and you're dealing with people who have a spiritual problem, and instead of dealing with the physical, you need to address the spiritual. So he says, the text says that the storm showed up so bad that it beat up the ship, And verse 38 says, and he was in the bottom part of the ship. Verse 38, sleep. Now, hold on. Now, the last time they were this ain't the first time they've been on a ship with Jesus and a storm broke out. As a matter of fact, the last time they were in a storm on the sea, Jesus came to them walking on the water in the middle of the storm. The last time they were in the middle of a storm, he was walking on the same thing that's bothering them. You would think that if you connected to the Most High God and he walked on the problems that you was having before, then